Albert Einstein, one of the greatest minds in history, died in 1955. Just hours after his death, his brain was gone. This is the story of the bizarre afterlife journeys of Albert Einstein's brain. The mysterious case of the man accused of taking it, and of how it was finally tracked down.
There it was. This is the brain that changed everything.
In the afterlife, specialists would put Einstein's brain to the test. What did they discover? Is Einstein's brain truly unique? Two scientists set out to solve the great brain mystery and whether it can reveal secrets of genius. Does intelligence reside in 1¼ kilos of fatty tissue, or is it something mysterious, incorporeal, something we can never finally quantify or understand?
I think it's a good probability that this is the last time you'll see Einstein's brain.
Come on. I don't know, just somehow I feel as though we shouldn't be doing this, but...
What will they find on their journey? Can Einstein's brain solve the riddle of Einstein's genius? April 1955, Princeton, New Jersey. The neurons that made Albert Einstein one of the finest minds of the age will soon stop firing. Age 76, he scrawls his last notes.
Yes.
Mutters his last words in his native German. Quietly, he dies. Otto Nathan, his close friend and executor of his will, gathers those closest to Einstein for the cremation. As they grieve, none of the family realize the body inside the coffin is not complete. There are less than 24 hours between Albert Einstein's death and his cremation. But in that time, a part of the body disappears. One part is missing. Someone has taken Einstein's brain. Today, that someone lives in a quiet backwater of America. This is the man who opened up Einstein's skull and took out one of the greatest brains in history. In 1955, Dr. Thomas Harvey was 42. By chance, he was the physician performing autopsies when Albert Einstein died.
I was the pathologist in the Princeton Hospital.
Dr. Harvey had met Albert Einstein before, when he made a house call to perform a routine blood test.
Usually I sent female technicians to homes to do the work. But this case, I went myself. When I walked into his bedroom, he said, "I see you've changed your sex."
The next time Dr. Harvey came face to face with Albert Einstein was in the autopsy room.
The autopsy on Einstein was a standard procedure. I don't remember feeling any special feeling.
The official file on Einstein's autopsy has disappeared, and it is still a mystery why it was conducted at all.
The standard procedure is to open the body, which is lying on its back, by a Y incision from each shoulder to the middle and then down the middle line. From then on, you are examining individual organs one at a time. You weigh it and describe its appearance, so forth.
The world's press was waiting to hear how Albert Einstein had died.
I told them that Einstein had this defect in his aorta and that eventually ruptured and he bled to death.
But there was one thing Dr. Harvey did not reveal.
To remove Einstein's brain, I split the scalp from one ear to the other and expose the brain. Then you take your knife and go down and cut the spinal cord as far down as you can, and that's how you remove it.
It's standard procedure to remove, examine, and return a brain to the body. But Dr. Harvey had a different plan. He would not return this organ to its owner. Harvey confesses Einstein's son only read about the brain's removal in a newspaper the next day. He was very upset. But to avoid any publicity, he and Otto Nathan did not press for its return. Harvey got to keep the brain, but with it came notoriety. His pleas that he was preserving it for science did little to stem outrage.
There was a lot of controversy at the time. There were some people who thought I was a little sacrilegious working on Einstein.
Was Thomas Harvey saving mankind's greatest brain, or committing the grave-robbing crime of the century? Einstein's destiny as a great physicist was not obvious. As a child, his passion was music, not physics.
I often think in music. I live my daydreams in music. If I were not a physicist, I would probably be a musician.
But Einstein's life changed when he was given a book on geometry. The universe could be tamed through numbers. His life's work would be to control the music of the universe. During his life, Einstein changed our concepts of space and time forever. He harnessed energy, mass, and the speed of light in the most famous equation of all time. E equals mc squared. What made Einstein's brain so exceptional? Dr. Jim Al-Khalili, like Einstein, is a physicist and is obsessed by the work of his hero. Brain specialist Dr. Mark Lithgow hunts for the secrets of creativity inside the human mind.
My name is Dr. Jim Al-Khalili. I believe Einstein's genius came from his imagination, and no man or machine can measure that. Am I right?
My name is Dr. Mark Lithgow, and I believe that Einstein's genius comes from nerve cells which can be analysed. We can find out what made Einstein a genius. Am I right?
So which view is correct? To solve the riddle of Einstein's genius, Mark and Jim will have to journey to America to hunt down and examine Einstein's disembodied brain. Nature or nurture? Biology or training? Are geniuses born or are they made? Neurophysiologist Dr. Mark Lithgow is a keen climber and finds parallels between his hobby and his profession.
Now, there are two scenarios for how the brain works. The first scenario is the brain is like a muscle. Now, I've trained to develop the stamina in my muscle, hopefully, that I can hold on to this hold for a period of time. The second is that the brain is like a skeleton. And it doesn't matter how much I train, I'm never, ever going to be able to reach that hole right up there. Now, in Einstein's day, they believed that the brain was like a skeleton. It had natural limits, but that view is changing today. Instead, it is now understood that more and more parts of the brain behave like a muscle. They can expand with use. Then, if all of our brains are like muscles, could it be that we all have the ability to become Einsteins?
In the weeks after he removed Einstein's brain, Dr. Harvey was under pressure. Various scientists were jostling for access, but Dr. Harvey dug in. He and no one else would be curator of the greatest mind in science.
I knew it was a very special brain. I took very good care of it. I injected the preservative through the arterial system, which isn't done routinely. I took a lot of photographs from all angles.
Thomas Harvey would be the first and last person ever to hold Einstein's complete brain.
Then I began to take it apart.
In the 50s, the fashion in neuroscience was to put the brain under the microscope. Einstein's brain was carved up into 240 sections, each tagged, coated in celloidin, and preserved in alcohol. Harvey gave key samples to a few chosen eminent scientists. Was the very essence of genius locked in the grey matter? Should this, the holy grail of neurology, be revealed, Harvey's reputation would be redeemed. He would become the man whose quick thinking had saved the brain for all mankind. 50 years earlier, before it was removed, Einstein's brain was birthing a bombshell. Since the 1600s and the time of Sir Isaac Newton, the physics of the heavens had seemed solid and safe. But in 1905, Einstein published 3 papers that created an explosive new vision of our universe. But Albert Einstein's theories fell on stony ground. The physics world ignored his papers. For Einstein, there was no fame, no acclaim, barely an acknowledgement. Months rolled by. Then in 1906, a flash of hope appeared on the horizon, a single letter. A single letter, yes, but from the most important physicist of the day, Max Planck. Planck had read Einstein's paper on relativity and realized its huge implications. The world would never be the same again. Dr. Jim Al-Khalili and Dr. Mark Lithgow are in Southern California hunting for Albert Einstein's brain.
Let's do it.
Mark is sure Einstein's brain will give insight into Einstein's genius, but Jim is not convinced.
I think Einstein's genius was in his ideas. You're not going to find ideas pickled in a jar somewhere. I mean, he revolutionised physics in the 20th century. From his ideas of relativity came everything, the Big Bang, the expansion of the universe, black holes.
Just a minute, hang on. But all that, the imagery, the creativity, the genius, the intellect, came from his mind, came from his brain, came from his conscious thoughts.
But those don't exist anymore. His conscious thoughts don't exist anymore.
But what created the conscious thoughts, whether it was certain areas of the brain, whether it was the synaptic connections, they were a product of the brain, and certainly parts of those are still around.
I'm not expecting to find anything, but I'd like to be surprised.
For physicist Jim Al-Khalili, an imagination so extraordinary it could produce a theory as wild and abstract as relativity cannot be explained away by mere biology. Albert Einstein worked as a patent clerk. The dull work gave him time to think. Einstein's boredom would change the world. Travelling home by tram, Einstein looked back at a clock tower. A childhood thought flashed in his mind. He imagined his tram racing away from the tower at the speed of light. How would the clock appear then? The speed of light is always the same. The clock would appear stopped, he quickly realized, since light could not catch up the tram. But his own watch on the tram would move normally. Einstein had a revelation. Time can run at different rates throughout the universe, depending how fast you move. Each person's concept of time was relative to where they were in the universe. Relativity was born. As they head towards their first destination, Jim and Mark stop off at a ghost town, where time has ground to a halt.
It's as though time stood still here. It's like a slice through space-time.
Jim uses it to give Mark his first lesson in space-time. Einstein's theory that space and time are inseparable.
Squared times delta T. Einstein's theory of relativity says that time and space get combined together into what's called four-dimensional space-time, in which all times coexist. This ghost town is like one slice in that space-time. Time flows at different rates for different people and different places in the universe.
So it's different for me, it's different for you, it's different for the guy over there.
Yep.
So relativity means time varies across the universe.
Gives me a little idea.
Scientists like Mark find a parallel concept in the human brain. Our minds can actually alter how we perceive time.
So you think that relativity is all about time, right? Well, I think this is where your world of physics meets my world of brain science. And I can honestly say...
I don't know if the road is the best place for this, you know.
Oh, just give me 2 secs. You're going to really enjoy this. Oh, trust me, I'm a neuroscientist.
Mark, look out. Mark!
Didn't expect that, did you? All in the mind, see? We've all heard that expression that time slows down when you're about to have an accident. Well, it's true. Your conscious mind allows you to change your experience of time to cope with dangerous situations such as this.
You do that again and you're a dead man. Now, run by me that thing about consciousness and time again.
Right. You can speed up or slow down our conscious experience of time depending on the situation.
So incredible as it seems, the way our brains discern time is not fixed. Albert Einstein showed the world that time across the universe is not constant. And now brain science is showing that even the sense of time inside our minds is flexible. Or to put it more simply, positive situations seem to pass quickly, while negative situations apparently last longer. For Einstein's brain, time might as well have stopped. Research was going nowhere. To Harvey's shock and dismay, 1950s science could find nothing special or different in Einstein's brain. Harvey drifted away from Princeton and crisscrossed outback America, Kansas, North Carolina, California. His prize stayed by his side, sometimes in glass jars, sometimes even in Tupperware. And for decades, the world forgot all about Einstein's brain. Today, Stephen Levy writes for Newsweek, but in 1978, he worked at a small magazine in New Jersey.
My editor told me, I want you to find Einstein's brain.
After lots of dead ends, Stephen Levy had a hunch that Dr. Harvey would know where it was.
So I called him up. I don't know how I could help you, he said. And I said, look, I'm going out to see you. So as this interview stretched on, and every so often I would just say, well, where is it? And he would deflect the question. Until finally, I think it really was, I said, don't you have any pictures of it? And, you know, I didn't want to leave empty-handed. That's when, for some reason, he got up without another word, walked around the desk, and moved out these medical jars. They were like big mason jars that held within them, the remains of Einstein's brain. And it was a profound moment. I mean, there it was. This is the brain that changed everything.
For the second time in his life, the world's press descended on Dr. Harvey, who was once again portrayed as the Frankenstein of the story. Einstein's executor, Otto Nathan, denounced this freak show.
Your view that Einstein would never, ever have agreed to have his brain examined in such a way.
Back under the spotlight, Harvey had to act. Trained only as a pathologist, he needed an ally to advance the research which he'd struggled to begin for so long. In the 1970s, Professor Marion Diamond was a rebel. Established brain science had only focused on nerves and ignored the other cells in the brain, the glial cells. Glial cells are like tiny electricians, insulating and fixing neurons in their correct place, speeding up impulses, and repairing the brain's complex circuitry. Working with rats, Diamond discovered how important glial cells actually are. If she gave rats mental exercise with toys and companions, their glial cells multiplied massively. Rats left alone in bare cages had no such change. So glial cells must be important in mental development. Rats with active brains have more glial cells. But is the same true in humans? Marion Diamond needed samples from a really active human brain, a genius brain. On a student notice board, she saw an article announcing the rediscovery of Einstein's brain. She hunted down Thomas Harvey. She needed that brain. Dr. Harvey sent samples of Einstein's priceless brain through the post.
It arrived, believe it or not.
No.
In a mayonnaise jar.
That's great. The Kraft Miracle Whip mayonnaise jar.
Yes, there were 4 pieces. They were sugar cube sized, and they were floating in a solution.
Mark is about to have his first glimpse of Einstein's brain.
We were looking for the nerve cells and the supporting glial cells.
And the glial cells are the other cells in the brain.
Right, there are only 2 kinds of cells to make up a brain.
Right.
And in our experimental work, we show more glial cells per neuron when our rats are exposed to enriched environments.
Was that the same in Einstein's brain?
He had more glial cells. These are the glial cells, the little round ones there.
That's fantastic.
And these are the nerve cells. You can see their nucleus. They're just beautifully preserved after such a long period of time.
That's incredible. The first time that you saw that, after all the studies that you'd done, and you looked at Einstein and you saw that the ratio was increased of glial to neurons, that must have been a revelation. You must have been jumping up and down in the lab.
And when they could say that, yes, we had statistically more glial cells per neuron in one area here in his so-called left parietal area, that was amazing. It was very clear.
So genius is not just about ideas. It does seem to have a biological basis.
Mark's argument is gaining momentum. Einstein's physical brain was indeed different. In the contest between ideas and biology, he's pulling ahead.
Really saying that if we find the brain, if we look at pieces of the brain, there'll be something in there that's hardwired that shows us how his brain developed. My argument is that, okay, he had the genes to become a scientist, but there was something extra in him to be able to think in a different way to other scientists and mathematicians.
Mark and Jim arrive in New York. Jim is sure the traits that set Einstein apart from other scientists cannot be measured. They're intangible. To win Mark round, he brings out his star witness.
Well, I'm about to meet a man who I'm hoping will have a whole new take on Einstein's genius. See you later, Mark.
Professor Michio Kaku is a leading physicist at the City University of New York. His recent biography challenges conventional views on Einstein's genius.
Hi, Michio. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
So I'm feeling this is a great success for me, that I'm able to turn corners.
So the key to figure skating, believe it or not, is physics. Because I understand Newton's 3 laws of motion and appreciate their power, it's made me a much better skater.
So what does Michio Kaku think is the secret to Einstein's genius?
Einstein himself was asked, what is the secret of your genius? And he said, to ask questions that only children would ask. What does light look like if you could race alongside it? If it's 12 o'clock on the Earth, is it 12 o'clock on Mars or 12 o'clock on Venus? Einstein asked children's questions. And when he asked these children's questions and he spent decades trying to solve them, then he changed everything around him.
It's not that I'm so smart. It's just that I stay with problems longer.
And do you think Einstein's level of concentration was somehow unique?
I think if you look at the annals of science, only Newton and Einstein had the ability to then concentrate enormous firepower on one problem. Both Newton and Einstein could work on a problem till they lost literally many pounds of their own body weight. They would refuse to eat. They would simply lock themselves up in a room, concentrate on physics problems, page after page.
I think and think for months and years. 99 times the conclusion is false. The 100th time, I'm right.
That there's probably an Einstein in all of us. If we had the opportunity, if we could concentrate that firepower, if we could have that childlike ability to challenge the dogma of the day, then perhaps we too could make stunning breakthroughs in science.
Professor Kaku makes a strong case for genius residing in the personality and character of the individual. Jim's argument for imagination over neurology gains new ground.
Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world.
But Einstein was sufficiently interested in exploring a neurological basis for his intellect to allow scientists to analyze his brain as he worked on mathematical problems. The primitive science of the early 50s failed to find anything exceptional. Without brain data, biographers have looked for clues to Einstein's genius elsewhere. Einstein's concentration was legendary. Could Einstein's genius, far from being the product of a beautiful mind, derive, in fact, from neurological disorder? Physicist Jim Al-Khalili has made the case Einstein's genius resides in his extraordinary character. But for neurophysiologist Mark Lithgow, Einstein's obsessive feats of concentration point to a neurological explanation. He's come to Cambridge to meet autism expert Professor Simon Baron-Cohen.
Some biographers of Einstein have focused on the fact that Einstein spoke late relative to typically developing children. He wasn't speaking clearly until he was 4 or 5 years old, which is years later than normal. And that he may have had this pattern of echoing other people's speech. And these signs are seen in autism, but they're not definitive diagnostic symptoms.
Mike, would you like to do a maths test? Yes? Okay. I'm going to give you some numbers.
Michael Agassiz is in his 30s. He is profoundly autistic. He cannot speak and barely recognizes language. But his concentration, like Einstein's, is astounding.
I've given him two numbers absolutely at random with 6 digits, so they're in the hundreds of thousands, with a multiplication sign in between, and he is just multiplying the two of them together. And he's carrying all the numbers in his head. Done it? Right, now look, your first numbers, 2, 8, 7, 1, 7, 5, 6, 6. They're all right, aren't they? Well done.
The sum Michael has done in his head is too big to fit on a conventional calculator and must be done in 2 parts.
And the last 4 numbers are 7, 1, 2, 4, which are exactly the same as yours. So it was right. I have no idea how he does it. It's just an amazing talent that he has. I think it's possible that Einstein was autistic. It sounds as though he found it quite difficult to relate to people. He must have had great powers of concentration, a bit like as Michael does.
But there's no test for autism. It will be impossible today to prove one way or another whether Einstein was autistic, even if the brain were in one piece. For Mark, putting Einstein's brain back together again is essential if he's to understand how it worked.
Dr. Mark Lithgow, very pleased to meet you.
Meeting Thomas Harvey for the first time, Mark has an idea which may allow him to turn back the clock 50 years and rebuild Einstein's brain. These photos, which Thomas Harvey took before cutting the brain into 240 pieces, are the last witness to its physical structure. Can state-of-the-art computer graphics turn these two-dimensional images into an accurate three-dimensional representation of what was lost? Using these photos, Mark asks computer experts to resurrect the brain as an accurate graphical model. With this model, Mark can drive home his point to Jim. Einstein's brain has major physical differences. The moment of truth. Mark downloads the computer model.
Wow. That's the first time that brain's been whole in 50 years. 240 pieces, thousands of slices, and they put it back together.
So what can you say about it? What can you see there that might be unusual?
Let me show you, Jim. This is where the parietal cortices are. These are at both sides, slightly above the ears, towards the back.
Mark has learned that Einstein's parietal lobes are different, as shown by Marion Diamond's work.
We found in his left inferior parietal area he had significantly more glial cells per neuron.
Mark shows Jim something even more special about Einstein's parietal lobes. They're abnormally large.
15% wider in Einstein's brain. I guess that's going to come from two reasons. One, either it was born like that, and those parietal cortices, which is the bit where it's wider, actually created that, or it could be the environment. Those are the areas for maths, mathematical reasoning, and visuospatial programming or processing. It could be because he was working out those areas, they actually grew larger.
Because the brain overall wasn't any bigger than average size.
No, not at all. It was around the control range, which, as you say, that's maybe a little surprise to someone. You expect Einstein, big brain, but that wasn't the case, apart from the 15% wider at the parietal cortices.
So Mark proves to Jim that Einstein's brain was radically different. But there are other, even more crucial alterations.
This is Einstein's Sylvian fissure. The Sylvian fissure runs up and sort of above the ear. And the Sylvian fissure is the Grand Canyon of the brain.
Normally, the Sylvian fissure splits in two and encircles a region around the area shown in red to make a distinct island. But as the computer model shows, in Einstein's case, the usually distinct division is far less apparent. It follows that dramatic physical differences in the shape of the brain might have equally dramatic neurological consequences.
And in Einstein's brain, the multiple folds, ridges and grooves around that area sort of blend into one another. And it's been suggested that that might increase the connectivity between the various regions.
One group of people show the bizarre effects of extra connectivity. They have an extraordinary condition called synesthesia. Imagine if your hearing and vision overlapped.
So, Jay, what does that sound like to you?
It had a lot of goldenness about it, a lot of shininess and some steps. Mostly for me, it's when I hear sounds, I see things. It can be any sound at all. It can be a door slamming or a phone ringing or months, days of the week and so on. For example, my Wednesday has always been a lemony yellow with funny sort of angles in the middle of it. I mean, Wednesday just is lemon yellow, isn't it?
Oh, of course, of course. Now, James, what's yours like?
It's very, very different. What I get is when I hear words or word sounds, I get a very sharp and immediate and involuntary splash of taste.
You're getting these incredibly strong flavours just appearing in your mouth, sort of, that are overriding.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing it now. I had there, when you said overriding, I had, it was a bit like a fruit pastel, a bit like a very old fruit pastel taste.
So, James, what does Albert Einstein taste like to you?
The Albert part tastes of yoghurt. Fairly thick yoghurt, but it is just yoghurt with no pieces in.
Yeah.
And Einstein is a peculiarity. It's like there's a wafer flavour in it. So it's yogurt and wafers.
Is it possible that an unusual overlap in maths and spatial thinking is the key to Albert Einstein's genius?
Princeton, New Jersey. Einstein's last home. Jim meets brain biographer Carolyn Abraham.
Here it is, Einstein's house.
That one? Black and white?
That's it.
Wow. So where's everyone? Where's all the tourists?
There's not even a plaque, sort of in keeping with his wishes that he didn't want anybody to pay homage. Yeah, no, it's a very modest house.
Carolyn's book uses new evidence to re-examine the half-century journeys of Einstein's brain.
I think any time you're talking about a dead body in an autopsy suite, there's a Frankenstein element in the public mind, and I think that has certainly followed Dr. Thomas Harvey around. He's the man who stole Einstein's brain. I think history has had that view. But what I found in my research was, in fact, a very different story.
So he came to the hospital and he died in the hospital.
Princeton Hospital.
You've done this.
For the first time in almost 50 years, Mark takes Dr. Harvey back to the very scene where he excised Albert Einstein's brain.
So, where were the reporters standing during the press conference?
Right where you and I are standing.
So they were standing here?
Yeah, and I was standing right there.
Wow. Shall we go inside, Dr. Harvey?
Okay.
After half a century, what revelations might still lurk in the shadows?
And this was the lab which you initially worked?
That's right.
40, 50 years since you've been back here.
You are right.
Wow.
Yeah, same old autopsy table.
Dr. Harvey maintains that the morning that he performed the autopsy on Albert Einstein, he was not alone.
When you performed the autopsy, there were other people in the room. Where were they standing in the room?
Well, there was only one other.
Only one, yeah.
Einstein's good friend, who was standing here watching the procedure, his executor, Otto Nathan.
Otto Nathan was completely devoted to Einstein, almost to the exclusion of all else.
This, of course, is to help open the skull.
I think it would have been very difficult for Otto Nathan to actually bear witness to seeing his very close friend dissected. And it's a brutal process.
It was his good friend he was being autopsied, but I never heard his reaction to it.
Dr. Harvey claims Otto Nathan witnessed every cut and slice of the gruesome procedure. Could it be possible he didn't realize Harvey intended keeping the brain? Certainly his first response to the breaking news was outrage.
Otto Nathan just went ballistic.
Whilst the public controversy rolled on, Otto Nathan and Dr. Harvey held a private meeting. From then on, it seems Otto Nathan gave his full yet covert backing to Dr. Harvey, whilst keeping the affair at arm's length. For decades, Otto Nathan would act as Harvey's silent partner, hoping that science could show his genius friend's brain was truly unique. Researching her book, Carolyn Abraham discovered a secret cache of letters from Otto Nathan to Thomas Harvey.
And I hope that when your two children come to New York, you will ask them to come and pay me a visit.
He kept this correspondence very, very quiet. He certainly never let on in the few interviews that he gave over the years that he was, in fact, in touch with Tom Harvey. And Tom Harvey himself was never open when he so many times could have used it in his defense by saying, you know, look, I wasn't alone in this. I had the permission, the consent, and the enthusiasm, in fact, of Einstein's closest friend.
For 50 years, Dr. Thomas Harvey has been seen as little better than a grave robber. Only now it can be revealed that he had the full support of Einstein's executor.
both wanted the world to realize in some level that he truly was physically a genius. And Otto Nathan put his faith in Thomas Harvey to actually sort of put that stamp on this organ and say that, yes, there are physically recognizable symbols of genius here.
Did you ever wish that you'd not done that autopsy?
No, I don't. It was really a great honor. And I was just the lucky person who was here and got to do it.
Mark and Jim tracked down Dr. Harvey's successor, the new curator of Einstein's brain. After months of negotiation, they've gained exclusive access. So how will it feel to see, touch, and hold this iconic relic?
16E, we're pulling right here, Jim. I only get to see this bloody brain, I tell you. I'll be well pissed off if we get there and there's 2 empty jars or something.
After nearly half a century of wandering, determined to ensure the safety of his most prized possession, Thomas Harvey finally gave up Einstein's brain. He entrusted its safekeeping to fellow pathologist Dr. Elliot Krauss to be stored for posterity at a secret location.
I think Dr. Harvey did a great service. He preserved the brain for the last 50 years, something that...
And there could be yet more secrets to discover. What's the future for the brain?
I would like to maintain the original intent of the brain, and that is that it wouldn't be used for anything other than scientific purposes. I think it's a good probability that this is the last time you'll see Einstein's brain in a television documentary.
After all this time, it's a weird feeling. It's strange being so close to the grey matter that came up with relativity theory. The numbers, every piece is labelled, every piece is numbered.
Do you know how few people have had this opportunity to do this? I just can't believe how... I'm just really moved by this. If this guy, as we believe, is a genius, somewhere in there is locked in what represents genius.
So Einstein's brain has given up some of its secrets to Mark and Jim. In the battle of biology versus ideas, Jim and Mark have each scored points. Seemingly, Einstein was born with overlaps in his brain. These overlaps may have meant maths and spatial thinking were more intuitive to him. Thinking like a child let him see the world in a unique way. And his unique, perhaps autistic, level of concentration forced his brain to expand like a muscle. Extra glial cells were needed to cope with the extra demand, possibly helping make the maths area in the brain more than 15% wider than normal. All these effects united to give Einstein a mind unlike any other, perhaps the greatest mind in history. In the future, could we preserve a genius like Einstein in something better than a jar? Imagine a brave new world where a genius brain could be copied onto silicon using microscopic robots called nanobots. This is the vision of futurologist Ray Kurzweil.
I think by the 2020s, late 2020s, we will have completely reverse engineered the brain and understand how all the different regions work. It'll take us longer to be able to scan an entire brain and capture every detail of someone's personality. The blood vessels in the brain go everywhere, and so if we send billions of nanobots through the capillaries of the brain, they could scan everything in the brain of a specific person in very high resolution. Then you could create a machine, a non-biological entity that would simulate a specific person's brain, and that simulation will act just like that person, and if you then talk to that simulation, you'd be convinced that it was that person.
I'm a little worried about whether I'm talking to the real Ray or he's at home having a cup of tea.
Well, I worry about that too. Once we understand the basic principles of operation of how the brain works, we can take a brain-like system and expose it to a complicated problem, and the system can learn on its own. It can actually do it thousands, maybe eventually millions of times faster than a real human brain, and actually develop skills that are far greater than a human being is able to.
So a future Einstein could be put on a computer, literally, a ghost in the machine.
Do you believe that, you know, just by looking at that, genius is, or is genius something else for you?
It's a key moment. Has Mark won Jim round?
Day by day, I've been changing my views. I started off feeling that Einstein's ideas had gone forever. What he thought of, what he was capable of imagining was something of the past. I'm not so sure now. I feel somehow there are still, maybe, possibly, some secrets locked inside this jar.
This simple glass jar holds the actual slices of Einstein's grey matter that Dr. Harvey sealed for perpetuity half a century ago.
Shall we have a look inside?
Yeah, let's have a look.
Go on.
I don't know, just somehow I feel as though we shouldn't be doing this, but... Wow, can you get one of those?
You know, Dr. Thomas Harvey kept this all those years, despite knowing probably how much they were worth.
Yeah, it reminds me of those small little creatures from hundreds of thousands of years ago that were embedded in the amber. These are absolutely gorgeous. I mean, not just because of the fact that it's Einstein's brain and what it represents and where we are scientifically, but any of these pieces would easily have their place, I think, in any museum, any art gallery throughout the world, just because of what it represents.
Einstein's brain. Removed, lost, rediscovered, analysed, and now saved forever.